After a long day at the office, Clint barely had time to breathe before heading home, his mind already shifting to what truly mattered. Rooney, his golden retriever and most loyal companion. The second he stepped through the door, Rooney was right there, tail wagging at full speed, practically vibrating with excitement. Clint couldn't help but grin. No matter how rough the day was, coming home to Rooney was like flipping a switch from stress to peace. To Clint, Rooney was more than just a pet. He was a brother, a best friend, the only one who had seen him at his worst and loved him anyway. He had been there through the highs and lows, his presence a steady comfort in ways Clint couldn't put into words. But tonight was about something else entirely. Tonight was about Jane, his girlfriend. For years, they had built something special, something Clint was ready to make permanent, and tonight was the night. At the restaurant, everything was set. The candlelight, the folded letter Clint had spent hours perfecting, the words that would shape his future. As he read aloud, pouring every bit of emotion into his voice, Jane listened intently, her eyes softening, a smile tugging at the corner of her lips. Then Clint knelt before her, his heart pounding in his chest, and asked the ultimate question. And Jane, her voice barely above a whisper, said yes. For a moment, Clint felt like he had won the lottery, like everything had finally lined up perfectly. But fate, as always, had one last twist. As they talked, Jane casually revealed a truth Clint had never seen coming. She was allergic to dogs. For years, she had silently endured it, never saying a word, afraid that telling Clint would hurt him too much. But now, with marriage on the horizon, she had to be honest. After they got married, Rooney couldn't stay. Clint sat there, the world shifting beneath him. How had he never noticed? How had Jane kept this hidden for so long? And now, with forever on the table, how was he supposed to choose between Jane and Rooney? That night, Clint confided in his cousin, Tony, over drinks at a bar, trying to make sense of everything. Tony, ever the problem solver, tossed out a suggestion to find someone trustworthy to adopt Rooney, someone who could give him the life he deserved. With Tony's huge Instagram following full of dog lovers, it seemed doable. But when Clint got home, the weight of it hit differently. Rooney greeted him like always, his tail thumping against the floor, his eyes filled with pure love. And Clint? He felt like the worst human alive. As he hugged Rooney tightly, whispering apologies, he realized there was no way to explain to a dog that you're about to break his heart. But what choice did he have? A week later, Clint and Tony sorted through adopters, taking time off work to personally select Rooney's new home. The first candidate was a mother, eager to adopt Rooney as a companion for her baby. But as they chatted, Tony's phone kept buzzing, startling the baby, making the woman snap like a firecracker. Her temper flared, her irritation boiling over, and Clint saw the red flags immediately. No way was she the right fit. The second candidate was a wealthy businessman looking for a golden retriever to boost his image. He pictured himself strolling through the park, looking cool, but the moment he complained about fur buildup, Clint had heard enough. Dogs weren't accessories, and if he wasn't ready to love Rooney completely, he had no business owning one at all. Disappointed, Clint and Tony moved on to the next candidate, a father looking for a dog for his son, Junior. Junior had lost his beloved dog, and since then, he had shut down completely, locking himself in his room, barely speaking to anyone. His father hoped that Rooney could bring Junior's spirit back. Clint, moved by the story, went to Junior's room, hoping to connect with him. But when Clint showed Rooney's photo, Junior's demeanor shifted instantly. Rooney looked too much like his late dog, and in a sudden burst of anger, Junior accused Clint of stealing his pet. The argument spiraled fast, leading to a fight, and in the end, Clint refused to let Junior adopt Rooney. On the way home, Tony suggested stopping by Clint's late mother's house, which had been empty for years. While Tony checked the upper floor, Clint wandered downstairs, his steps hesitant. When he reached his mother's room, he froze at the doorway, unable to cross the threshold. The memories were too raw, the grief still fresh, like it had never faded at all. He remembered the night his mother passed, the emptiness that had swallowed him whole, and Rooney, who had been the only thing keeping him together. That was why he loved Rooney so much, because in his darkest moment, Rooney had been his light. That night, Clint and Tony stopped by a cafe, drowning their emotions in booze and nostalgia. As the alcohol burned down his throat, Clint opened up, sharing memories of his mother, his regrets, his wish that he had done more to make her happy while she was alive. And through it all, one thought remained unshaken. He couldn't let Rooney go. The weight of his mother's absence crashed into Clint without warning, and before he knew it, the tears started flowing. It wasn't just grief, it was the raw, aching kind of longing that never faded, no matter how much time passed. He couldn't understand why she had left him, why the woman he had loved more than anything had disappeared from his life. Tony, seeing his cousin fall apart, did the only thing he could. He handed Clint a tissue, hoping to calm him down. But something funny kicked in. The tissue, apparently smeared in hot sauce from their dinner, instantly burned Clint's eyes, sending him into a louder, more dramatic cry. Tony tried to keep a straight face, but failed spectacularly. The moment was ridiculous, heartbreaking, and oddly hilarious all at once. By the next morning, Clint had shaken off last night's emotional wreckage. But the problem remained. He still hadn't found a suitable adopter for Rooney. Tony, ever the optimist, threw out a new idea. His uncle, a rich man experienced in raising dogs, could take Rooney in. With him, Rooney's life would be guaranteed, without the constant worry of mistreatment or neglect. Clint, relieved to finally have a solution, agreed. They headed straight to his uncle's place, determined to seal the deal. When they arrived, Tony told Clint to wait in the yard while he went inside to talk to his uncle. Before Tony could even get a word in, his uncle cut him off, his tone casual but commanding. He needed Tony to take care of his own dog for 6 months while he traveled abroad. The offer came with a hefty paycheck, practically forcing Tony into an agreement he hadn't signed up for. So instead of getting Rooney adopted, they ended up bringing home another dog. On the drive back, frustration hit like a tidal wave, with Clint and Tony blaming each other for the entire situation. Tony, desperate to reset his brain, suggested they stop by the park, giving themselves space to breathe and think straight. That night, back at Clint's apartment, Tony was restless, scrolling through his phone, searching for a way out of this mess. Then he found something promising. A woman named Hannah, a devoted dog lover with an entire park dedicated to rescued dogs. Tony was confident. This was their answer. Checking her location, they realized the park was far. Jeju Island, to be exact. Clint, initially hesitant, knew they had no choice. For Rooney's sake, they had to make the trip. The next day, the two hit the road. Midway through the trip, a car passed by carrying a rare breed of dog, and Tony, always obsessed with cute things, snapped a picture. Then they hit a pothole, sending the phone flying out of his hands. Clint, laughing at the absurdity, froze when Tony turned to him, dead serious. The phone wasn't his, it was Clint's. Panic set in. They immediately pulled over, sprinting back to retrieve the phone, their bickering echoing down the empty road. When they returned to the car, they were greeted by chaos. Rooney and Tony's uncle's dog barking nonstop at a cardboard box nearby. Inside, they found a heartbreaking sight. Puppies dumped like trash. Feeling a surge of anger and pity, they decided to take them with them, heading to the nearest shelter for help. But once there, the manager assessed the puppies, explaining they were crossbreed dogs, unlikely to get adopted easily. The shelter refused to take them in. Clint, devastated, knew they had no choice but to take them back. When Clint carried the puppies back to the car, Tony refused to let it go. He wanted to speak to the manager personally. With confidence that could move mountains, he walked in, ready to convince her. Instead, he ended up being the one listening. The woman, weary from her own struggles, opened up, explaining that she had found a dog dumped in front of the shelter that morning. A tiny, scared thing, abandoned like garbage. She brought the dog out, and the moment Tony held him, his entire demeanor changed. The cuteness melted his heart instantly, and without hesitation, he decided to adopt him. When Clint saw Tony return with yet another dog, frustration boiled over. They had more dogs than they could handle, and at this point, Hannah was their only hope. If she didn't agree to take them in, they were officially doomed. Determined, they continued the journey, stopping at a nearby inn to rest. The next morning, Clint woke up to the disturbing sound of a dog barking in distress. Stepping outside, he saw an elderly man, the owner of the place, beating his dog. Horrified, Clint rushed to stop him, demanding to know why he was doing this. The man, unbothered by Clint's fury, explained he was upset that the dog wouldn't eat. He planned to sell him to a dog meat restaurant, but if the dog didn't fatten up, he wouldn't sell. Clint, shocked beyond words, acted instinctively. He bought the dog on the spot. The old man, pleased with the deal, handed the dog over without hesitation. After freeing the poor thing, Clint updated Tony, and while they were glad they had saved him, their situation had officially spiraled out of control. There were too many dogs and no idea how to manage them all. Tony, remaining hopeful, reminded Clint. Hannah was their last shot. They had to believe she would take them all. Clint, exhausted but holding on to hope, agreed. With that, they continued their journey, heading toward the harbor where their final chance awaited. After hours on the boat, Clint and Tony finally arrived at Jeju Island, their exhaustion barely contained as they stepped onto solid ground. Their first stop was a bakery where Tony, ever the social butterfly, struck up a conversation with the shop assistant, asking about Hannah. But the moment Hannah's name was mentioned, a woman buying bread froze, her expression shifting before she bolted out the door. Tony, curious as ever, rushed after her, chasing her down like a detective on a case. It turned out that the woman was Hannah's headmaid, and when Tony explained their purpose, she immediately refused to help. But Tony, never one to back down, begged relentlessly until she finally gave in. When they arrived at Hannah's house, Clint and Tony were greeted by servants who escorted them inside. Rooney stayed by Clint's side while the other dogs were taken away. As they passed through the park, Clint's eyes widened in amazement. Dozens of dogs roamed freely, their tails wagging, their lives seemingly perfect. Before meeting Hannah, the maid warned them. Hannah had Parkinson's disease, a condition that affected her nerves, so they had to be careful with their words, ensuring she didn't get stressed or offended. When they finally sat before Hannah, Clint and Tony explained their story, laying out everything. Fortunately, Hannah was willing to accept Rooney and the other dogs, but something felt off. When Clint introduced Rooney, Hannah's reaction was cold, indifferent. With a detached tone, she said she didn't need to know their names because eventually they would die. She told Clint that if he hoped Rooney would find a new family, he was wrong, because family never leaves each other. Clint fell silent, her words echoing in his mind. That afternoon at the beach, Clint and Tony sat in deep thought, replaying Hannah's words. And then it hit Clint like a freight train. He had been making mistakes all along. Since his parents died, he had felt alone, desperate to build a new family, rushing into marriage as a solution. But in doing so, he had forgotten something precious. Rooney was already his family. With his mind made up, Clint canceled his plan. Hannah was right. He shouldn't leave Rooney, no matter what. He hoped Jane would understand, but if she didn't, he was willing to postpone the wedding. Seeing Clint struggle, Tony stepped in. He offered to adopt Rooney himself. Since he was already paid to take care of his uncle's dog, he figured Rooney could be his companion, and he could look after the puppies until they found homes. As family, Tony was willing to help. Clint, deeply touched, thanked Tony, feeling a weight lift off his shoulders. That night at the inn, Clint was chatting with the owner, when suddenly Tony screamed from inside. Rushing to check, Clint found Tony buried in puppies, playing like a kid in a candy store. At that moment, Tony had an idea. Instead of finding adopters, why not open a dog cafe? That way, the dogs wouldn't be abandoned, and they could become a source of income. With the money from his uncle, he could start the business, ensuring the dogs had a permanent home. Clint, loving the idea, offered to invest. The next morning they headed home, their mission complete. When they arrived at Tony's uncle's house, Clint thanked Tony for everything, and as Rooney played happily, Clint quietly slipped away, leaving behind the dog he loved most. Rooney's absence hit Clint harder than he expected. Walking into the apartment, seeing his empty bed, feeling the silence wrap around him, Clint felt like something fundamental had been ripped from his life. No excited barking, no warm welcome, just a hollow space where joy used to be. That night he didn't sleep. His mind spiraled with guilt, replaying the moment he walked away, imagining Rooney waiting for him, confused, lonely, abandoned. By morning, Clint had made up his mind. He had to go back to his mother's house. That afternoon, he poured himself into cleaning the place, tidying up the yard, restoring the home that had been left untouched for years. Once everything felt right, he sent Jane the address, asking her to come meet him. When she arrived, Clint laid everything out. He couldn't live in the apartment anymore, not when the house had space for Rooney to stay, not when it held memories of his parents, of his real family. Then, with deep sincerity, he apologized. He had tried to leave Rooney, but he couldn't. Since his parents died, Rooney had been his only family, his constant, the one thing that had kept him going when the world felt too heavy. Instead of being disappointed, Jane was amazed. Her future husband had made a wise, heartfelt decision. Relieved beyond words, Clint felt the weight disappear. They stepped inside and Jane paused, her gaze settling on the tightly closed door of Clint's mother's room. She knew. She had always known that Clint had never truly let go, that he had avoided the pain, keeping it locked away, untouched. But today she didn't push. She simply held his hands, offering comfort instead of confrontation. They would build a happy family, fill the house with new memories, create a life filled with warmth. And finally, when Clint was ready, she walked beside him, accompanying him inside his mother's room. The next day at Tony's uncle's house, the other dogs ran freely, playing, chasing each other, barking with excitement. But Rooney sat alone, ears low, eyes full of longing. He missed Clint. It was obvious. Then in the midst of his quiet sadness, Clint arrived, standing at the entrance, ready to take Rooney home.